Kenji Tanaka stood in the marble foyer of his Kyoto mansion, holding a cream-colored cashmere scarf between his fingers, like it was made of glass. The scarf belonged to his wife Yuki. He had bought it for her 8 months ago, during their last trip to Milan. She loved the way it caught the light. She wore it often. But this morning, as their housekeeper folded laundry, she had noticed something the Yakuza boss's wife could not have noticed herself. A smear of crimson lipstick on the inner edge, hidden by the weave, not her shade, not her color. Dark burgundy, almost black in certain light, the kind of lipstick a woman wears when she wants to disappear into shadows. The morning light filtered through the high windows of the foyer, casting long geometric patterns across the marble floor. Kenji had spent 40 million yen renovating this entrance to his compound 5 years ago. The Italian marble had been imported from Carrara, chosen specifically for its crystalline structure and its coldness. The fixtures had been custom-made by a master craftsman in Florence, who had since retired and died. Every surface had been designed to communicate a specific message to anyone who entered. This is the home of a man of consequence, a man of refined taste, a man of absolute power. Now, holding the scarf, Kenji felt that message dissolving like mist. The marble suddenly looked cold. The fixtures looked ostentatious. Everything he had built to project permanence was showing its fragility. Kenji was 57 years old. He had ordered 43 men killed. He had orchestrated the theft of over 100 million yen across 3 decades. He had survived 4 assassination attempts, 2 with violence, 2 with negotiation. He had personally ordered the elimination of 3 rival family members who had threatened his organization's territory. He had broken arms, orchestrated disappearances, built empire through fear and careful violence. He had spent 30 years cultivating the kind of power that made men do what he wanted without having to ask twice. He had never, in all that time, felt the particular cold that moved through his chest at this exact moment. His hands did not shake. His jaw did not clench. The small muscles around his eyes did not flinch. But something deep inside him, something he had spent a lifetime learning to control, began to come undone. It was a feeling he recognized from his early years in the organization, before he had learned to bury it completely, the sensation of ground shifting beneath his feet. He set the scarf on the Italian marble table and stepped back from it, as if it might explode. The lipstick stain seemed to glow under the morning light, a small red mark that had somehow undermined everything he thought he understood about his own life. He did not touch it again. He simply stood looking at it, the way a man might stand looking at something that has already destroyed him, but he does not yet fully comprehend the extent of the damage. Yuki had been his wife for 22 years. They had married when she was 28 and he was 35. She came from a good family, not connected to the underworld, but connected enough that she understood what marriage to him meant. Her father was a financial advisor to several legitimate corporations. Her mother came from a family of sake merchants with several centuries of tradition, breweries in Nagano and Tokyo. Yuki had grown up with money, with education, with the understanding that the world operated according to rules that could be navigated by the right people with the right connections. She would be protected by marrying him. She would be wealthier than she already was. She would never ask questions about his business. In return, she would manage his household, oversee his social calendar, raise no children. He had made it clear he had no desire for children, and appear beside him at appropriate functions, looking appropriately beautiful and appropriately silent. It was a clean transaction. Millions of marriages in Japan operated on similar terms. He had expected nothing more from her. He had received nothing less, until now. Their marriage had been organized with the precision of a business merger, which in many ways it had been. They occupied the same house but separate worlds. They shared certain meals, always with staff present. They appeared together at formal events, where her presence was required to demonstrate his stability and legitimacy. They had separate bedrooms connected by a hallway they rarely traversed. They had established, over 22 years, a comfortable distance that required nothing from either of them except basic civility and the maintenance of appearances. He had other women when he desired them, discreet affairs conducted in love hotels and private establishments in the city, and Yuki had never questioned this. He had never asked where she spent her time during the daylight hours, when he was conducting business at the office or meeting with associates in the city. In the architecture of their arrangement, they had each been given enormous freedom in exchange for discretion. He had assumed she understood the limits of that freedom. The lipstick on the scarf meant something. Lipstick does not appear on cashmere by accident. It does not migrate there from a woman's own lip through simple proximity. It transfers during contact, during physical closeness, during moments of emotional intensity. Someone wearing lipstick had held this scarf. Someone had held Yuki while wearing it, or Yuki had held someone. The distinction mattered, but only in the way that a single degree matters in a raging fire. Either way, his wife was keeping secrets from him in his own house. She was engaging in activities he did not know about, activities significant enough that she was willing to deceive him repeatedly, deliberately, consistently. The question was not what she was doing. The question was what that doing meant for the carefully constructed edifice of his life, built stone by stone over 30 years. Kenji picked up his phone and made a single call. He did not say hello. He did not say goodbye. He said 4 words. "I need to see surveillance." The man on the other end of the line did not ask for clarification, did not ask which surveillance, did not ask why. The men who worked for Kenji Tanaka had learned long ago that clarity was his responsibility, not theirs. They were responsible only for immediate obedience and absolute discretion. Asking questions was a luxury for men who were not in his employ. As he waited for the security footage to be prepared, Kenji walked to the study adjacent to the foyer. This room reflected a different side of his aesthetic sensibility. Where the foyer was about display and assertion, about announcing power to visitors, the study was about power expressed as understated control. Dark wood paneling on the walls, leather chairs positioned to face the desk, a single painting on the wall, a 17th century landscape that had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Shelves containing books that looked impressive and were mostly unread. A desk positioned so that anyone seated behind it could see the entrance without being seen clearly themselves. He sat in the desk chair and held the scarf in his lap. His fingers traced the lipstick mark. It was dry now. It had been there for days, perhaps weeks, hidden from him by the fold of fabric, hidden in his wife's closet, or perhaps hidden because it was meant to be found. That was the kind of question that occupied his mind now. Was Yuki reckless, or was she trying to tell him something? Had the scarf been carelessly stained, or was it a message? A woman's lipstick on a scarf she wore frequently. A message hidden in plain sight. 22 years of marriage had taught him almost nothing about his wife's internal landscape. That recognition was beginning to feel less like a failure of his perception and more like a fundamental misunderstanding of who she was. Perhaps he had never tried to understand her at all. Perhaps he had been content to see her as a decoration, a necessity, a requirement of being a man in his position. Perhaps she had been waiting all this time for him to finally look at her. 30 minutes later, Kenji sat in the security room on the basement level of his compound, watching 4 weeks of surveillance footage in accelerated time. The security room was climate-controlled to preserve the equipment and obsessively organized. 3 men monitored the 64 cameras that covered his property, watching feeds from the perimeter gates, the interior courtyards, the main building, the guest houses, the service areas, the garden. The cameras had been installed 3 years ago, after a rival family had made a clumsy attempt to penetrate his security. They had captured everything, recorded everything, preserved every moment in high definition. Kenji had chosen to trust the machines more than he trusted people, which in hindsight seemed like a reasonable decision. The machines did not lie. They did not have agendas. They did not keep secrets. He had instructed his security team to leave. Now only Kenji remained, sitting in the dim light of a dozen monitors, watching his wife move through his house like she was an actress in a film he had never seen before. He had seen Yuki in this compound thousands of times. He had walked past her in hallways. He had seen her in the garden arranging flowers. He had observed her managing the household, speaking to staff, preparing for social events, but he realized now that he had never actually watched her. The distinction was becoming increasingly important. To see without watching was to miss everything essential about a person. What he saw should have made him angry. Anger would have been a mercy. Anger was an emotion for men who felt betrayed. Kenji felt something much more complicated than betrayal. Instead, what he felt was something much worse: recognition. He was watching his wife in her real life, the life she lived when he was not present, and it was a life so vivid, so purposeful, so animated with actual human feeling that his 22-year marriage suddenly seemed like a stage set after the performance ends, empty and hollow and made of painted wood. The woman he was watching moved through the compound with intention. She spoke to people with genuine warmth. She made decisions with confidence. She was alive in a way he had never seen her be in his presence. This was the woman behind the composed facade. This was the woman he had married without ever trying to know. 3 times in the past 4 weeks, Yuki had left the main house and walked to the East Garden House, a smaller building on the property that had belonged to his mother before she died. He had closed it after her death when he was 32 years old, right before he married Yuki. It was a grief response, he supposed, though he had never articulated it as such. His mother had been the one person in his life who had known him before he became who he now was. She had known him when he was still capable of gentleness, before the organization had hardened him, before violence had become casual. After she died, he had no longer needed a place that held her memory, that echoed with her presence. He had sealed the building and ordered it left untouched. No one went there. No one had any reason to go there. It was a tomb for a life he had abandoned. Except Yuki. His wife had keys to every room in his compound. He had given them to her without thinking. The way a man gives his wife keys without ever imagining she might unlock doors he had specifically chosen to keep closed. Keys were symbols of trust. He had given her every key in his house. He had made that gesture in the beginning of their marriage, when he thought such gestures were necessary. Now he understood that he had handed her the keys to his own undoing. On the surveillance footage, Yuki would bring items with her. Food wrapped in cloth, medicine bottles, clean clothes folded with careful precision. She would leave the main house in the early afternoon, always when she believed he was not present, and walk down the stone path toward the East Garden House. She would unlock the door and enter. She would stay for periods ranging from 45 minutes to 3 hours. During that time, the cameras would show nothing. The building was too far from the perimeter cameras. The interior was unwatched. It was private. When she emerged, she would emerge with the same empty hands she always had, her face carefully arranged into neutrality, her walk the precise speed of a woman doing nothing unusual. It was masterful. It was the performance of a woman who had been rehearsing this role for a very long time. 3 other people appeared in the footage leaving the main compound through the service gate. Kenji did not recognize them. They came on specific days, always at different times, always using credentials that matched the names of service workers. A plumber named Tanaka, an electrician named Suzuki, a landscaper named Yamamoto, the kind of names that would not stand out in a security log, the kind of names that would blend into the ordinary maintenance of a property. But the files were false, he checked. All of them. 3 workers that did not exist, coming and going through a compound that should have been impossible to breach. And the only person who could have created those credentials, who could have arranged for those fake IDs, who could have had the access to do it was someone with intimate knowledge of his security systems, someone with his wife's access level, someone he had trained personally, someone he had trusted completely. Kenji paused the footage and sat back in his chair. The screen showed an image of his wife walking down a garden path, a bundle of cloth in her hands, her face serene and focused. He did not know this woman. He had lived with her for 22 years, and he did not know her at all. He did something he had not done in 15 years. He removed his shoes and sat on the floor of the security room. His men would not enter now. They would wait in the hallway outside the locked door. They would assume their boss was thinking, in the way that men think when they are processing dangerous information. They would be partially correct, but they would never know the truth of what was happening in this room, because Kenji had not yet decided what the truth was. What Kenji was actually doing was falling through time. He was reconstructing his marriage in reverse, looking for the exact moment when his wife had stopped being his wife and became someone he did not know. Was it the trip to Kyoto 3 years ago, when she spent an afternoon alone that he had not questioned because he had never questioned her before? She had gone to a temple, she said. He had not asked which temple or what she did there. Had she been there organizing something? Meeting someone? Was it the night she had asked him if he slept well, and when he said yes, she had looked at him with an expression that now, in retrospect, looked like grief? Was it earlier than that? Was it always? Had she been waiting from the very beginning of their marriage for the moment when she could no longer be complicit in what he was? The marriage that had seemed so clean, so transactional, so carefully arranged to require nothing emotional from either party, had perhaps been something else entirely. It had been a woman in a cage, and cages, Kenji understood now, could be comfortable. They could be spacious. They could be filled with all the material comforts a person could desire. They could have beautiful views and fine furnishings and access to the world's best everything, but they were still cages. When Kenji stood again, he was no longer the man who had entered the security room. That man had lived inside a specific reality. This man lived inside a different one. The question was what he would do about it. He climbed the stairs from the basement level, passing his men in the hallway with a single nod that suggested nothing was wrong. He climbed to the second floor, where the residential chambers were located. He walked down the hallway to the sitting room that Yuki favored, the one with the view of the rock garden, the one where she spent the afternoons when she was not working in the East Garden house. He found her exactly where he expected her to be. She was reading a book, a Japanese novel, the kind of literary fiction that addressed themes of mortality and isolation. She was not looking at it. She was reading it, with the kind of attention that suggested she was trying to disappear into it. She looked up when he entered. Her face was perfectly composed, but he could see now, knowing what he knew, that the composure was a construct. The person underneath it was terrified. She stood up when she saw him. She set down her book with careful precision. She waited. "Hello," she said, her voice steady. "Did you have a good day?" Kenji did not answer immediately. He was looking at her, really looking at her, perhaps for the first time in their marriage. He saw the faint lines around her eyes that suggested she had not been sleeping well. The dark crescents underneath them spoke of weeks of sleeplessness, of lying awake waiting for discovery. He saw the way her hands moved when she thought no one was watching, with a kind of nervous energy that was completely at odds with the serenity she had perfected for his benefit. He saw her collarbone, visible through the silk of her blouse, and noticed she had lost weight. He saw a woman who was far braver than he was, or far more foolish. Perhaps there was no difference between those things. "Come with me," he said. His voice was quiet, which was often worse than shouting. His men had learned to fear his quiet voice more than his rage. He took her to the East Garden house. He did not allow her to speak. They walked in silence through the corridors of his compound, down the stone path to the small building that had been his mother's home, the building where his mother had lived her own kind of hidden life, separate from his father, separate from the world, alone with her thoughts and her grief. When he unlocked the door, he could smell it immediately. Lavender oil and human occupation and fear. The smell of a place that was being lived in, however temporarily, however secretly. The East Garden house had been converted into something between a safe house and a medical clinic. There was a small bedroom where a woman slept on fresh linens, a woman with a bruised arm and haunted eyes, who sat up in bed when she heard the door open, her body tense with the muscle memory of violence. There was a bathroom with proper plumbing and clean towels and small bottles of shampoo and soap. There was a sitting area with books and water and food and a thermos of tea. There was a medical kit with bandages and ointments and medication. There was, most importantly, evidence of another human being living in hiding inside his house, inside his walls, under his roof, with his wife's knowledge and assistance and protection. Yuki did not try to run. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom and waited for whatever would come next. The woman in the bed shrank back, terrified, and Yuki moved to her with a gentleness that Kenji had never seen her show toward him. She placed her hand on the woman's arm and whispered something that he could not hear, but understood was meant to be reassuring. "How many?" Kenji asked. His voice was cold in a way that made even the woman in the bed flinch. Yuki turned to face him. She did not look at the woman anymore. She looked at her husband. 11, Yuki said, "over the past 6 years. 6 years. 6 years of resistance, of deception, of his wife building a secret life within his carefully controlled world. 6 years of women in the East Garden house. Women who had escaped from men like him. Women who had been trafficked or coerced or controlled. Women who had nowhere else to go. And his wife had been the one to shelter them. She had given them a place to heal. She had given them documentation. She had given them money. She had given them the space to reclaim themselves. The magnitude of what she had done, the complexity of what she had built, began to settle on him like snow. "You understand what this means," Kenji said. It was not a question. "Yes," Yuki said, "I understand what this means." What it meant was that she was guilty of treason against the organization. What it meant was that she was guilty of harboring fugitives from the families that supplied labor to the underground operations. What it meant was that she was obstructing business relationships worth millions of yen. What it meant was that any man in his position, any man who valued his reputation and his standing and his honor, would have no choice but to make her disappear, just as all the others disappeared, just as everyone disappeared when they became a liability. The woman in the bed watched them both, understanding, perhaps, what was about to happen, what kind of man Kenji was, and what such men did to people who betrayed them. "Why?" he asked. Yuki was quiet for a long moment. She did not move. She did not try to explain or defend herself. She simply stood in the doorway of the East Garden house, surrounded by the evidence of her secret rebellion. and waited to answer the question that would determine her fate and his. "Because you stopped asking that question about anyone else," she finally said. Her voice was soft but firm. "Because at some point, you stopped seeing people. You only saw problems and solutions. You only saw obstacles and opportunities. Because the women who came to me were no longer women to anyone. They were inventory. They were losses on a balance sheet. They were complications that could be eliminated. Because I could no longer be married to someone and pretend not to see what he was doing. Because every day that passed, I became smaller. Every year that passed, I disappeared more. Because I had to find a way to live with myself. Because you taught me, in all the ways you treated me like I did not exist, that I had to become someone who did not exist in your world so I could exist in my own. I looked at these women and I saw myself. I saw what I was becoming. I saw the future unless I changed something." Kenji turned away from her. He looked at the East Garden house, at the evidence of his wife's secret rebellion, at the woman in the bed who was watching him with the kind of fear that he had seen in many faces throughout his life, but never in the face of his own wife. He thought about the 11 women. He thought about where they had gone. He thought about what kind of help Yuki had arranged for them. He thought about the lipstick on the scarf, about that small mark that had led him to this moment. He thought about the surveillance footage of his wife moving through his compound with purpose and direction. He thought about how in every frame, even when she was being deceptive, she looked more alive than he had seen her look in years. He also thought about what would happen if he did nothing. If he left her alive, left her operation intact, left her doing what she was doing, then word would get out. The other families would learn that his wife was running a rescue network. They would learn that the Yakuza boss's own household was being used to harbor fugitives from their operations. They would see it as a weakness. They would see it as an opportunity. They would come for him, and when they came, they would come for her first. She was already dead. He was simply choosing how death would arrive. But if he killed her, if he shut down the operation, if he made her disappear as the rules of his world demanded, then what would he have protected? His reputation, his standing, his power. What did any of those things matter if he was simply one more man doing what all the other men did, justifying cruelty with necessity, pretending that the system itself demanded what he wanted to do anyway? He would be choosing to become the kind of man he had always been, the kind of man he no longer had to be. Kenji made a decision. It was not a decision born from love, though love was part of it. It was not a decision born from mercy, though mercy was part of it. It was a decision born from something deeper than either of those things. It was a decision born from the recognition that there were two possible paths in front of him, and only one of them led anywhere he wanted to go. It was a decision born from the memory of his mother, sitting alone in this house, waiting for him to become someone other than what she knew he was becoming. It was a decision born from 22 years of looking at his wife without seeing her, and finally, seeing her now. Kenji picked up his phone and called his security chief. "Lock down the compound," he said. "Seal every exit. Full security protocol. No one enters. No one leaves. You have 30 minutes. He heard the confusion in his security chief's voice. "Yes, sir. All exits. What about the service gate?" "All exits," Kenji confirmed. Complete lockdown, but then he paused, choosing his words with the precision of a man orchestrating something far more dangerous than any crime he had ever committed. "Then I want you to open the service gate, completely and fully. I want you to leave it open for exactly 1 hour. After 1 hour, seal it permanently. Tell no one why it is open. Tell no one how long it will remain open. If anyone asks, you opened it to check the mechanism. That is all. Just do it." He ended the call before his security chief could ask further questions. The security chief was a man who had worked for him for 12 years. The man would obey. The man would not understand why, but he would obey. That was what loyalty meant in Kenji's world. Then he turned to his wife. He had made his choice. Now she would have to make hers. "There is a car waiting outside," Kenji said. "The keys are in the ignition. The doors are unlocked. There is money in the glove compartment. 4 million yen. It is not enough for a new life, but it is what I can give you without raising questions that will make people curious. They will need to see that I am a man of consequence, that my wife has betrayed me, that you have run because you could not bear the shame. That narrative protects you. That narrative makes you disappear in a way that matters." He moved closer to her, and for the first time in their marriage he did something he had never done. He reached out and touched her face. His hand was gentle. "You will take the women from this house. You will gather them. You will move them quietly toward the service gate. You will take the car. You will go. You will not come back. You will not contact me. You will not tell anyone where you are going or what you are doing. When people ask what happened, I will say that you left me. I will say that you were unfaithful. I will say that you disgraced me. Those stories will protect you. Those stories will be your shield." Yuki's hands were shaking now. Tears had begun to move down her face, but she did not move to wipe them away. "Kenji, do not thank me," he said, and there was no gentleness in his voice now, only command. "Do not apologize. Do not explain. Do not ever try to contact me again. Just go. You have 50 minutes. The window will not stay open. The gate will seal. When it seals, you need to be gone, understand?" She understood. Her understanding was absolute. She moved with sudden clarity and purpose. She did not pack her belongings. She did not take pictures or mementos or anything that might suggest she was leaving by choice. She did not even take the book she had been reading. She simply became the person she had been secretly all along, a woman capable of action, of resistance, of saving people from danger. She moved through the compound, gathering the women from the East Garden house, moving them quietly toward the service gate, speaking to them in low voices that Kenji did not try to hear. 1 woman, 2 women, 3. By the time she reached 6 women, moving carefully through his corridors, using the keys he had given her so freely all those years ago, Kenji had walked to his study and positioned himself at the window overlooking the service gate. He did not look at his wife. He did not look at the women she was sheltering. He watched the gate. Then the gate opened. The moment it opened was the moment everything changed. Kenji's life split into before and after. Before the gate opened, he was a man of consequence in a world governed by rules he did not make but had mastered perfectly. After the gate opened, he was a man who had broken those rules, who had chosen differently, who had let go of everything that made him powerful in order to become human. He watched as his wife moved toward the car. He watched as the women moved toward the car. He watched as she helped them inside, as she checked that they were ready, as she took the driver's seat. He watched as the car pulled away into the night, carrying his wife toward whatever came next, a new city, a new name, a new life where she did not have to perform serenity, a life where she could exist for something other than decoration, a life where she could be the person she had always been underneath. Then he picked up his phone and called his security chief again. "Close all exits," he said. "Full lockdown. Secure the property. I want every camera checked, every entrance locked, every possibility sealed." "Yes, sir," came the response. "Sir, the East Garden house. We found evidence of occupancy, medical supplies, bedding. There are items that don't belong. What should we do with them?" Kenji was quiet for a moment. This was the moment where everything would either hold or collapse. This was the moment where he would either maintain his power by maintaining the fiction, or where he would let the fiction go and accept the consequences. "Seal it," he said. "You found nothing. There is no evidence. There is no occupancy. There is only the place where my wife spent time when she was lonely. There is nothing else. Understand?" "Understood, sir." When Kenji hung up the phone, he sat in his study in the dark. He did not turn on the lights. He did not pour himself a drink. He did not call anyone or issue any orders. He simply sat in silence and felt the particular weight of the decision he had made. He was a man who had built his entire identity around control, around power, around the ability to command others and bend circumstance to his will. He had been very good at it. He had been very successful. He had accumulated wealth and territory and the kind of respect that came from fear. But in the moment when it had mattered most, in the moment when he had been presented with a choice between maintaining that control and releasing it, he had chosen something else entirely. He had chosen the impossible thing. He had chosen mercy. His wife had been right about one thing. At some point he had stopped seeing people. The cost of that habit had been the loss of the one person in his life who had been brave enough to see him as he actually was and love him anyway. And in loving him, she had loved others he would have destroyed. In leaving him, she had given him the possibility of becoming someone different. Whether he would take that possibility, whether he would use it, whether he would become more than the man he had been, that was still uncertain. The lipstick on the scarf had been a message all along, not a message of betrayal, a message of resistance, a message that said, "I see what you do, I see what you are, and I am brave enough to walk away from what you can give me. I am brave enough to want something real." Kenji sat in the dark of his study and understood finally what it meant to be truly alone. He also understood that this was not a punishment. It was a gift. It was the possibility of becoming human again, one choice at a time. It was the understanding that the only exit that mattered was the one his wife had walked through, carrying with her the capacity for grace that he had spent his entire life destroying in others. Outside, the compound was sealed. Every door was locked, every window was secured. The gates were closed, the walls were high, but inside the sealed compound, Kenji Tanaka had become free in a way that no amount of money or power could ever purchase. He had let her go. In doing so, he had become someone he thought was long dead. He had become a man who could choose mercy over ego, and mercy, he was beginning to understand, was the only real power that had ever existed. It was the only power that transcended the systems men built. It was the only choice that actually mattered. It was the only power that could make a man human again. This is a fictional narrative. All images and videos were generated by artificial intelligence for entertainment purposes.